The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we cover the Austin FC news of the week, including a preseason game that we actually got to watch this time. We also have another game we didn't get to watch, and then we'll talk also about the Austin FC 2 schedule, US Open Cup news, referee news, MLS Next Pro schedule news, and a lot of other stuff. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and this is definitely a grab bag of a week news-wise, and I'm just excited to get one day, I guess every day we get one day closer to the start of the season, so we're just, less than 2 weeks out? And also, I'm excited about tonight for many of you on February 13th, doing a little live show at Amplify and sort of the Amplify Esperanza branch, and just having a little bit of a time to preview the season and hang out with some friends and enjoy ourselves. So you looking forward to that too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's going to be a good time. I think Mike Crignola is going to join us for it again for like he did on New Year's Day. We're going to have some beverages and some snacks there. But yeah, it should be a really good time. I'm looking forward to it.
And then just one other programming note, the over-under contest, we played that with Marcelo, last week, I think now. The weeks all run together. And the entry form is out there if you want to play along. There will be prizes at some point before the season's over. We will determine what those prizes are. But get your entries in before the season starts. And we'll put the link to that contest in the show notes again.
All right. Should we get into preseason matches?
Yes. Yeah. It's like you said, one we've seen and one that we had probably the sparsest information on, which is the one we're going to start with, which is the Chicago Fire match.
Yeah. So this one ended 1-0 in favor of the Chicago Fire. I think it was a late-ish goal once some subs had been made. So I guess without having seen it, with not really knowing anything that happened, what can we say about this game? I think one of them is that this was the first preseason game that I don't want to call it a starting 11 necessarily, but it was as close to that as we've seen, right? It's up until this point, it's been mixed 11s where it's guys you expect to be starters and second team guys and fringe players all mixed together between two groups of 11. This was all guys who are currently on first team contracts who you could very easily see being starters on match day one.
Yeah, and that seems like the biggest news out of that. So maybe you want to go through go through who those guys were? Yeah,
so the starter for that one was Brad Stuver, John Gallagher, Julio Cascante, Leo Väisänen, Jean Kolmanich on the back line. Alex Ring reportedly as a lone six in kind of that 4-3-3 or 4-1-2-3, however you want to count it, that we saw a lot in, I guess, in the years run together. Is that how they lined up in 2022?
2022, yes.
Yeah. So, but with Alex Ring as that lone six, Danny Pereira and Driussi as the dual 10s. Again, like glossary section here. Josh Wolff calls those two forward midfielders 10s. I'm going to call them 10s for simplicity. You could also call them 8s, but I'm going to go with 10s. So Pereira and Driussi as those 10s, and then Rigoni on the left wing, Ethan Finley on the right wing, and Zardes starting as the 9. People we didn't see in this game. I don't think we'll talk about Guilherme Biro here in a bit. I don't think he was even in town yet for this one, so he wasn't there. Rubio had gotten there a couple of days before. He did not appear in this game. And then CJ Fodre, who got a little knock. We asked Wolff about him in the media availability last week, and he says it didn't sound like anything serious. He didn't play in the Galaxy game either, but Wolff doesn't seem to be too concerned about it.
Yeah, and this is one, and maybe we don't get into the whole season talk, but I'm interested to see what minutes CJ gets, or if CJ is just still mostly an ATXFC 2 guy, or if we expect to see him play significant minutes with the first team, because there's a little bit of depth there, but not a ton, and he hasn't seen a lot of time in preseason to prove himself.
Yeah, and we'll talk about maybe during the Galaxy game reasons why he might not. But these are this is the part of the year where ideally he would be getting minutes and showing that he's worthy of those minutes. And if he's injured, he's not going to get a chance to do that. So it really could be a detriment to him.
Yeah, I guess so. The goal was pretty. I think it was in 62nd a minute or something. It came from Chicago Fire draftee Lawrence Wooten. So if you want to talk about sort of the quality of play in the second half, the fact that we've got draftees on scoring the goals probably shows that like the not the first team was on for the second part. I guess I saw some concern about the fact that Austin played their best 11 and generated no attack. Do we worry about that at this point in the season?
I mean, yeah, a little bit, but without actually seeing it, like who knows? Like maybe they got a bunch of shots off and none of them went in, or like it's just hard to say. But I mean, it is a little concerning that you would rather them score than not, right?
Yeah, goals are better than not goals for sure. I don't know a lot about this sport, but that seems to be a pretty obvious point.
Let's move on to the Galaxy one. We do know quite a bit about this one because we actually got to watch this one. So
yeah, it was pretty nice change.
Yeah, I mean, so this one ended 3-1. I would say that scoreline, tell me if I'm being unfair here. I feel like the scoreline is slightly flattering to Austin FC.
I think that's an understatement. I think it was very flattering to Austin FC because I saw a lot of people who were, including myself, who were, if not asleep, quite slightly bored by it for the first, 70 minutes or so maybe, before Austin really turned it on there at the very end.
Yeah, I think there are still some interesting takeaways from this game. And mostly just because it's the first time we got to see him, right? So this one, I don't have the lineup here. Let me see if I can do it from memory and you correct me if I get anything wrong. But we saw Cleveland in goal.
Correct.
Then Gallagher right back, Kolmanich left back, Väisänen and Hedges as the center backs.
Yep.
Then we had Alex Ring as the 6, Owen Wolff and Driussi as the 10s. And then left wing was Rigoni, striker was Zardes, and right wing was Obrian. So the changes in this game were Obrian for Finley on the wing, Owen Wolff for Danny Pereira in the midfield, Matt Hedges for Julio Cascante in at center back, and then Cleveland for Stuver. So again, not entirely what you would expect to be the starting 11, but pretty close to it. Just a few pieces there. I look at it thinking it's the guys who did swap in are guys you would expect to probably start some games this year. And so my guess here is that these are like either like getting a look at what these specific players look like with the rest of what you'd expect to be the starting 11, or giving them just like saying, okay, you're probably going to start some, so I want you to get some minutes with these guys. And I think in particular, those guys are Obrian and Wolff, and then to maybe a different degree, Steph Cleveland.
And Hedges, too, I would think. And
Yeah,
I think the Hedges one is...
Also, Cascante didn't play at all in this game.
I was going to say, yeah, that was the most interesting part of that. It's like, do we think that Julio got a knock or something? Because, he didn't get any minutes. So Hedges might have been just he's the one starter quality guy we have at center back who is available.
Yeah, I saw in one clip during the game, you could see Cascante sitting over on the sideline wearing like a white baseball cap, just like not like a fancy designer hat or anything, just like a baseball cap with the Austin FC logo on it, which is really funny to see a guy like Cascante wear, as stylish as he is normally.
Like he just rolled out of bed in his pajamas and threw a cap on and went down to watch the game.
Yeah, it felt like a hat that like Hector or Ethan or Matt Hedges would wear, but not Julio Cascante.
But not Julio. So Austin did end up with 3 goals. That was interesting that all 3 goals came from new guys. So Obrian gets 1, Rubio gets 1, and what was the deal with the name? We also got 2 first names.
Oh, yeah. So his official name is Bryant Farkarloon, but his Instagram handle is Jimmy. I found some videos on his Instagram of people calling him Jimmy, and so I believe he goes by Jimmy. So Jimmy Farkarloon got an assist and a goal in this game, right?
He did.
So let's, I guess maybe let's go through. I'd like to talk about kind of the attacking and defensive shape. This is one of the things that I was really interested to see now that we actually got to see what this team looked like, because there's some debate as to like how we're going to use the fullbacks. What are they going to kind of rotate into that 3-2-2-3 box midfield shape we saw a lot last year, or will they go back to that 4-3-3? And the answer was they went back to that pretty straight up 4-3-3 with a lone six sitting a little bit deeper. I think what we saw a little bit differently from this than what we'd seen in the past is in the buildup, they seem to be looking to break lines, either playing to the tins or to the striker fairly often. And you'd see often, I saw people talking about how often Zardes was falling down, but in his defense, he was getting fouled every time he touched the ball as well. So they would play a line breaking ball to him with his back to goal. The ball would touch his foot and then somebody would hack him down. But they were looking for these line breaking passes, trying to like jump a line, play forward a bit faster, which is the thing we didn't often see them try to do last year. So I think that was a positive. In Colorado, whenever Diego Rubio was playing as a 9, we know he often played as like a 10 or like a second striker. But when he played as a 9, he was usually flanked by guys like Michael Barrios or Jonathan Lewis or Kevin Cabral. And Rubio would often drop in to receive like in the midfield. And those fast wingers who like to stretch the field would be the ones to provide that verticality. And I saw Austin trying to do something similar to this. And I think Zardes did fine in that position. But once Rubio came on, I thought he looked a lot better there. And I'm really interested to see what it looks like once he's able to get more minutes.
So this is just a random like comment I got from somebody. I don't know if it was Twitter or Reddit or somewhere, but is there a world where they do that, where it's the two of them, up front together, or at that 9 and 10 together? Because I guess they did that some in Colorado and apparently were somewhat effective. The Rubio and Zardes combination during Zardes' time.
I think it's possible. I don't know that that's going to be like the first choice necessarily, just because of where we have enough players in certain positions. And
right.
Like also if I'll get into this now, I was going to talk about it later, but I feel like once Rubio, like from the 30 minutes or whatever we saw in this game, I thought he looked pretty good. And I was very encouraged by what we saw from him. I kind of think it's going to be his spot to lose once he gets match fit and he can go 60, 70, 80, 90 minutes. I think he's going to be the starter. And so if he's the guy, then play him up top. And we have other guys who can play as like, if we're going to play kind of the second striker or that box midfield, we have other guys who can slot into those other spots. And if he's the best 9, I say play him at the 9.
Play him at the 9 and not worry about that. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of Austin FC fans would probably be happy to see that after what we've seen from Zardes last year, where he seems to be getting hit by the age wall. Let's talk about Farkerloon. And I mean, there was a lot of positive comments from the coach. There was a lot of positive comments from fans just about how active it was, what a troublemaker he was during the game. But also, like Josh Wolff was full of praise for his play in this match, saying he did a good job in the second half. In limited minutes, he's lightning in a bottle, changes speeds quickly, he can get downhill on you quick. And that he did good arriving in the zone. And what was his last quote? Obviously, likes what he's seen enough to say that we will talk to his agent and see what makes sense. So he seems to have made a really strong impression during the preseason after Josh has been pretty down on adding any like FC2 players or or any of the new additions to the club. Yeah,
I asked him in the media availability a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember when it was, but he essentially said like, I don't want to sign any of these guys. And for him to be talking openly about like, yeah, I really like this kid, I want to see what he can do, is really interesting. I think we should take a grain of salt with this because of the fact that the second half did start to get a little bit leggy. The Galaxy started putting in some young guys, and so he was going up against Cuevas, who, I mean, he's not like a trialist. He is on their first team and was full-time on their first team last year, but he didn't play a ton and is going to be probably the second string guy there. So like I'm cautiously optimistic about what we saw from him, but I do still want to see him play more minutes against fresh guys, against fit guys who are like ready to go. But I mean, I want to see some more minutes, and it seems like Wolff thinks the same thing. He said he will get significant minutes against the Red Bulls. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's been an exciting addition. And to your point, like I don't think anybody's expecting double-digit gold contributions or anything, but just any productivity from a second-round super draft pick, or second-round pick, right?
Yeah.
One that a lot of people didn't seem very excited about Austin making from, remember, right, from sort of just the general consensus around the grades. So
I think a lot of people are looking at where, like, the schools that he went to and like the output he had there, but because of how close he is, I was also looking through some of his Instagram stuff and then like asking around some people. It seems like Austin knew who he was already and like had been in contact and maybe even seen him play or train before. Like that is what makes the most sense to me based on like where he came from, where like nobody was projecting him to go in the second round of the draft. And Austin took him kind of out of nowhere. I think they already had an eye on him and they're like, we know this kid, we like him. Maybe there's theoretically better prospects available, but we know this one and we're going to take him while he's available. So I think they kind of knew something about him beforehand.
Yeah, and that makes total sense because this super draft is such an inexact science. And we can point to Generation Adidas players who, 2-3 years ago that didn't pan out and aren't in the league. So I think there's a lot to say for selecting somebody that's a somewhat known commodity that you know you're going to be able to get something out of.
Yeah. Let's go through the goals real quick. So first one was scored by Jader Obrian, and this was a ball played wide to Driussi. He hits a back heel to Kolmanich, who's overlapping. Kolmanich rocks a low cross into the box, and Zardes and Obrian are in the box, and Obrian flexes his abs and scores a Zardes special with his abdomen there. But good positioning, like a good combo play on the left. So I'll take it. Not mad at that one. The Galaxy goal comes from a Fagundes shot, gets blocked really short range. The rebound falls out to Delgado, who crosses the ball in to a late runner on the far post, who finishes it. This is a fairly familiar situation where Austin gets pinned down into their box, are unable to clear it out at a reasonable distance, and the opponent is able to capitalize on a scrambling defense. So it didn't seem like there was any one person who was clearly at fault here, but it's just a team defensive effort of letting themselves get under that much pressure to begin with. They didn't make any changes in the second half to start with, but then Rubio comes on. Was it like 60, 70 minutes in or something like that?
Something like that.
He scores the second Austin FC goal, and this one is from starts with a corner. It gets headed away, falls to Toure, who had subbed in at left back, and it falls to him just outside the box. He quickly plays wide to Farkarlund. He immediately just goes straight at Cuevas, gets around him, pokes the ball between Yoshida, the center back, who was sliding into him, and then Jonathan Bond, who had shifted over to that near post, squeezes the ball right between the two, finds Rubio, who is just kind of poaching on that backside and is able to get a foot on it and poke it in. And then Farkarlund involved in the third one as well. So Finley somehow finds a bunch of space up the right flank, takes it all the way to the end line. Noel is making a run across the box and drags some defenders with him. Some other guys on the backside kind of fall asleep, and Farkarlund takes advantage of that space and arrives late on that backside. Finley, that Ethan Finley special, right? That like kind of lofted ball to the backside from in behind there.
From deep, yeah.
Yeah, finds Farkaloo on the back post, heads it in, 3-1. So all those goals kind of came all at once, and they kind of were able to, again, like we said, make an okay game look a lot better than what it seemed if you watched the whole 90.
Yeah, but all that matters at the end of the day is the scoreboard, except in preseason, when the scoreboard really doesn't matter either.
Yeah.
But it was good to see those guys. And I guess the one thing on the Rubio goal is because it was one where he was coming pretty hard, and he had to put a foot out. And I can see that's the kind of ball that Zardes doesn't get to. To your point earlier
Yeah.
on who the better number 9 might be.
And on that play, like dropping in as well, like dropping between lines and receiving with his back to goal. Like I feel like there was a few moments where he did some stuff like that, where it just, that kind of play is a lot more natural for him than it is for Zardes at this point in his career anyway. And so I guess like of the other players we haven't mentioned who stood out, I thought Steph Cleveland looked pretty good. He wasn't challenged a ton as far as shot saving, but Wolff talked about him kind of getting under pressure, playing out of the back, and had some nervy moments, but overall I thought did quite well. I thought center backs were like Hedges looked decent. Talking about Kolmich and Väisänen, the guys coming back from injuries, it was really encouraging to see them stay in the game for so long. I think Kolmich played 64 minutes, Väisänen played 72 minutes, both looking really confident. You remember when Väisänen came back from the injury last year, he did not look comfortable on the field, and he looked a lot better just as far as his body language, his attitude on the field. He seemed just to feel a lot better.
Yeah, I remember last year we had this discussion about whether he was like, did they rush him back, and was he really still injured because of the tenderness he played? Yeah, and you mentioned Kolmich delivering the ball in, and leading to a goal, which seems to be one thing that he's really good at. I think there'll be some quotes. I think Phil West has got some quotes coming out maybe from him about sort of his attitudes on playing defense. If you subscribe to Verde all day.
Yeah. Alex Ring, it felt good to have the boss man back in the midfield. A few shaky moments from him as well. And then I was also reminded that like this weird thing about Alex Ring where he's so good at like closing people down and like hustling into the right positions defensively. But then every once in a while he goes in for a challenge, goes into a 50-50 and just like can't come away with the ball for whatever reason. So I had kind of forgotten about that thing that we saw quite a bit from him a couple of years ago. But overall, I thought he was quite good. Owen Wolff, I mean, really mixed bag from him in this one, right? Like a lot of the game, the stuff I've complained about all of last year where he just looks a little bit too conservative sometimes, but then also some really bright moments carrying the ball forward where he was dribbling dudes. One moment where I think he's driving forward with two guys on him and some really nifty footwork to get around them. And so these little moments where he shows you how special he really is. And then some other times where it's just like he looks nervous or scared and he just turns around and plays the ball backwards when he probably doesn't actually need to in that moment. I think probably not enough opportunities near goal for Driussi. That's a thing I'm interested to see how much Rubio can help out with that as far as his playmaking ability and kind of his movement there in the middle of the pitch. And then I like Obrian and Rigoni. I thought Obrian worked hard, was really active. And I feel like Austin was more willing to kind of play long to these guys in certain moments. There's, of course, trying to play out of the back still, but as that kind of broke down and pressure built, they would play a long ball over. And I know a lot of like the last couple of years, whenever a long ball would be played, the attackers would kind of react to that and start running after the ball was gone. And you would see, okay, they're under pressure, ball gets dropped back to the keeper, dropped back to a center back, and they can't play out anymore. We're just going to launch it. The ball would go up, the camera would pan over, and you'd see Obrian already
starting
running.
Yeah.
You'd see Rigoni already running. You'd see Zardes already running. And I think that's a thing we didn't see a lot of ever from this team. And so I think these are some of the small encouraging things that we can take away from this game.
Yeah, unfortunately, we will have no more opportunities to see any preseason games, right? So it's one more game against Red Bulls in California. I think that one's on Valentine's Day, and then return to St. David's Performance Center against NYCFC on the 17th. So there may be some Verde Hill reports, but definitely not the depth of coverage that we got out of this one. So we can read into this. It's probably the best we're going to get out of the preseason is what we saw from this club, and ultimately it was encouraging.
Yeah. One more thing before we move on that I want to talk about is the defensive shape. And so there was some, mentioned some quotes from Phil West, from John Colemanich talking about defending a bit more. And if you looked at like Austin FC's rest defense shape, and what I mean by that is like, as we're attacking the guys who are not in the final third, where are they positioning themselves so that when we do lose the ball, how are we going to stop this? And I think the fullbacks were doing slightly different things from what we've seen the last year. It seemed like most of the time last year, the fullbacks were just go, go, go. Like, especially we'd shift into that back three and Gallagher would just like all the way up. And I feel like Colemanich maybe had a bit more free reign to go forward, but you would notice like as the ball's on the opposite side, Gallagher would often pinch in side and almost become like be standing next to Alex Ring, like deep in the midfield. And that does a couple of things. Like it puts another body in midfield so that there's more support during the attacking phase still, but it also puts another body in midfield so that when we lose the ball, when you have like a non-Danny Pereira 6 sitting deeper by himself in that midfield, having another one of those fullbacks sitting, or maybe both fullbacks sitting a little deeper, pinching inside, it should really help in defensive transition. And I don't remember many moments, if any moments, during this Galaxy game where they had attackers running at our goal with our only two center backs sprinting at goal, which is like a pretty familiar sight from last year, right?
Yeah, or honestly, from the entire history of this league, like right. I mean, this club, like seeing Julio Cascante on the verge of losing a foot race because nobody else is back is a very common Austin FC experience.
Yeah, and Ricky Puig did not play in this game. It might be some partly down to luck, partly to the Galaxy's playing style, but it is still like it seemed to happen in every Austin FC game for the last few years. And I don't remember it happening in this game where it was just the center backs by themselves running at their own goal. And that's, again, small victories, but it's encouraging.
All right, let's take a break and then we'll dive into the rest of the news of the week. When no one is around.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. Amplify's team lives and works in the community, making them the experts on how members can achieve their financial goals.
What makes Amplify different? No bank fees. Amplify is the first financial institution in Texas to put an end to bank fees. In 2022, Americans paid almost $8 billion in overdraft fees alone. I imagine it's probably about the same in 2023, if not more. Millennials pay an average of $336 a year in bank fees, which works out to 6 Austin FC game tickets per person per year. You'll pay none of those bank fees with Amplify Credit Union.
Yeah, and you can come see us the day this show's coming out at Amplify Credit Union Esperanza branch. We're going to be doing a live recording. Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident, so learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower. All right, we are back. Jeremiah, you want to talk a little bit about the jersey launch party happening this Thursday? Is that right? On Thursday?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, let's do that. I guess the first thing is, again, we saw weird possible leaks. I think somebody was at the outlet mall in San Marcos and saw what appeared to be a replica version of the jersey that they posted online, which maybe then disappeared when somebody else checked in. Looked consistent with what we've read, although I've seen some concern over the last couple leaky pictures we've seen that it's lighter than I would like it to be, but also that could easily be bad lighting. As someone who's looked at scarves and other merchandise and often thought it was lighter colored than I wanted it to be, ultimately, and the end product was fine. A lot of that comes down to the camera it's taken with, right?
Also, I think the difference in the replicas versus the authentics, some of the replicas have looked pretty good. Other ones have looked significantly worse than the authentics. And so like seeing the photo of that one from the San Marcos outlets or whatever. I liked it less than from the grainy EAFC leaks that we've seen. And so I'm hoping that the authentics are a bit more what of the picture I have in my mind as opposed to what we saw from the outlet leak.
I'm the same. And so the party's on Thursday. You're going, right?
Correct.
So I guess you want to share any details on like what you expect out of the party itself before we maybe talk about some of the elements on the jersey that we want to cover?
It seems like, I mean, it's going to be at ACL Live. So they've done it the last few years at Hotel Vegas. So it's a bit more prestigious of a venue, it seems like. I think there will still be live music elements to it. But outside of that, I don't quite know what to expect.
And then, yeah, and do we think that there's going to be... Okay, so they just put this video out that you were watching right when we started recording with a young Ray Benson doing some playing at the Armadillo World headquarters. Like, are you going to put in a Ray Benson shows up and play some music prediction?
I would be shocked. That seems
logical.
He didn't, because Ray Benson, he's the lead, like band leader and singer for a band called Asleep at the Wheel. They were among the group, Armadillo World headquarters being this legendary Austin music venue that no longer exists, but in the heyday of this alternative country scene that was springing up, Willie Nelson comes back to Texas from Nashville. He's playing at the Armadillo. Ray Benson, I don't believe he's originally from Texas, but whenever he moved to Austin, Asleep at the Wheel are mainstays at Armadillo World headquarters. And so Ray Benson is very much linked with this venue. And if there's what's this guy's name? Ken Burns, the documentary filmmaker, has a documentary called Country Music. And there is a big section, and I think it's when they're talking about Willie Nelson and him coming back to Texas and kind of the rise of outlaw country and all of that. They do a little section about Armadillo World headquarters. And if you can find that or are interested at all in American music at all, this whole documentary, all 18 hours or whatever of it are excellent. And I would highly recommend it. But if nothing else, try to find this little section on Willie Nelson and Armadillo World headquarters and Asleep at the Wheel, because Ray Benson features pretty heavily in it. But I would be shocked if Ray doesn't show up, because he seems to... He shows up at stuff in Austin all the time, and so this seems like prime territory for him.
Yeah, he does, and I feel like he's been around the Austin FC community some too. Yeah, one of the two weirdest bits of history with that whole genre of music is, you're right, I think he's pretty sure that Ray Benson's from Philadelphia, and then Jerry Jeff Walker's from New York State. And you think about these two guys being so deeply associated with this 70s, 80s Austin alternate country scene, but both transplants back from when Austin was a cheap city where musicians would move to because they didn't pay a lot of money and they could play gigs. And then so we've seen the Armadillo thing, I think, is super relevant because we've seen what appears to be an armadillo on the jock tag, right? From the grainy shot. Then this 525.5, I think, is somewhere. Is it on the back collar?
It's on the inside of the back collar there, yeah.
Okay, and the significance of that is the Armadillo World headquarters was located at 525.5 Barton Springs Road, in what was a National Guard armory. It's just an office building now, I think. It was demolished in the early 80s, turned into an office tower. But really, throughout the 70s, from 1970 to 1980, it was a really legendary Austin music venue that there's lots of articles and stuff in Austin history about it. But yeah, like you said, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Jerry Jeff Walker. This random thing I read was AC/DC's first American show was at Armadillo World headquarters in 1977. The Clash played there. Yeah, the London Calling album cover is the Clash playing at Armadillo World headquarters. So if you think
Clash
that's
were strangely obsessed with Texas and Wild West stuff, and so it doesn't shock me that they played there. But I am a little surprised AC/DC played there.
It doesn't seem like their thing. So yeah, never really super successful. I think probably any music venue run by somebody's a musician, I think is probably like ends up that way in a lot because
Yeah.
they're not necessarily good for business. But I think it's a really important part of Austin history. And I thought it was, I mean, I think it's interesting that it's covered now because it's important, but I kind of like where Armadillo World headquarters showed up sort of in the sequence of things because that would have been really easy. Like if you were looking for the most like stereotypical, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Willie Nelson kind of Austin experience, like start with something like this. I think it's cool that this is being honored and also being honored in the fourth season when Austin FC has really done a good job of like establishing their reputation in the community for sort of being the club for all of Austin. I don't know. It just makes it feel extra cool now for me because of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jeremiah, I am not going to be here next week. I'm going to be on vacation and we'll miss next week's, or I guess I'll be on part of next week's show with the live recording. But you and Mike are going to be doing something else on the show. Do you want to plug that now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and plug that now. So we have been talking with Andy Loughnane, who's been on the show, president of Austin FC, who's been on the show before. And we talked recently about like him coming back on, but having an angle that maybe not everybody would be familiar with, or not just when we had it on before, it's like, hey, Andy, what's going on? You know, what's new for the season and blah, blah, blah. And so at his suggestion, what we're going to talk about is sort of the jersey process and like how it gets developed, what the timeline is, maybe some of the, because like so much of the things we hear about jerseys are from people who feel very certain that like they know things, and I feel like they probably don't. So it'll be great to hear from the source sort of how these come about, the things they look into, what the timeline's like, how much discretion the club has, you know, and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to that interview.
All right, let's move on to, I guess we've had a couple of, or one like Josh Wolff media availability, and then Phil West also got some quotes out of him in California. So let's move on to that. What stood out to you from these, Jeremiah?
I think on the LA Galaxy game, he talked about the system and the philosophy of the system, which I thought was interesting because he hasn't directly addressed that. So he says, you know, philosophically, we aren't changing. Rodolfo's here. He knows what we're about. He appreciates the detail and the commitment to it. Takes shots at fans and the media and which is very Josh Wolffy, about what they think about it. But I think it was interesting for me to hear him sort of double down on the commitment to the system and also the sporting director's commitment to the system, and that is part of the reason he's here, because I haven't heard him talk a lot about that this offseason.
Yeah, well, that's something we've talked about before, right? It's like, this is not, like, Josh Wolff did not invent this system. He did not originate this system. It is a thing that exists in other places, and it exists in places where Rodolfo Borrell has worked most of his life. And so it is not like Borrell's not going to come in here. And like, if it is actually the style of play that you don't like, then I have bad news for you. It's not changing. Borrell is going to play this way. Like, as long as he's in charge, Austin will play this way, whether Wolff is the coach or not. There are things you can do differently within the system. There's not just one way to do it. And so there are things you can change, ways you can do it differently, but the positional play stuff is here to stay.
But one thing I think that is encouraging about Borrell being here is Borrell is committed to this system, and I don't know that Claudio Reyna was, and it seems like the players that were acquired before maybe didn't fit this system as well, and I think that was part of sort of like taking the team down to the studs, you know, from Borrell's perspective, is being able to acquire players that fit the style of play that he is committed to, regardless of who the coach is. Yeah,
I think that tracks extremely well with things we've heard, things we've seen, and just like what we saw out of this team for its first 3 years of existence. That, I kind of think Claudio Reyna was signing players he thought were good enough to play in MLS, and not necessarily players that were going to be good for Josh Wolff's system. And we've heard that they didn't always necessarily see eye to eye on this stuff. So, I think that if Josh Wolff is going to succeed as an MLS coach, that having a guy like Borrell and the players that we know he wants to bring in, like, I think this is the scenario where he could succeed if he's going to.
Did you have any other that was the big highlight for me from Josh from this week? Did you have any other notes on the availabilities that we didn't cover?
I was at one of them and I don't remember anything about it at this point. It seems like a year ago, but I think you did a good job of picking out the highlights there.
Okay. We also got a new. We were a little bit worried about whether we would get our new fullback in uh, before the season started. Oh, we need to give because we never give him credit. Was it Nick that sent us the pronunciation guide on Biro?
Oh, he sent it's like he sent us a recording of a Brazilian person saying the name. I cannot recreate the exact sounds that came out of this person's mouth, but as for like what I'm capable of doing, Guilherme Biro is about as close as I'm going to be able to get.
That's pretty good. It's closer to anybody else is going to get, but yeah, he was so in town, so we don't have to worry about him not making it for the start of the season. He's in California. He didn't see any time, but we got some comments. I think in the same post game media availability from the Galaxy that he's like there with the guys, hanging out. Talked about, I guess, Sebastian Driussi had him out somewhere doing something. So there was groups of guys playing. I think they had a golf outing together. So it's all these. I mean, it's good to see him getting acclimated. It's all the things that you expect to hear during the preseason about how the team's like getting together and liking each other. But I do think that that's one of the upsides of this Coachella Invitational, and then being like out
Yeah.
at a resort together and not with their family and kids and life and stuff like that, is this chance to focus on camaraderie and teamwork, which maybe is one of the main benefits of being in this tournament.
Yeah, and during that midweek press availability, they also had Diego Rubio speak to the media, and I like I had known a little bit about him before, but I'm a big fan of his after this media availability, and think like fans will like him. He also seems like a kind of guy who will be really good to have in this locker room because he is South American, can relate to all those guys that are coming from South America. He also has been in the US for quite a while now, I think 7, 8 years, something like that, and speaks English really well. And so being one of those kind of like bridge points that can speak easily and comfortably to the English speaking guys, can relate to the Latin American guys as well. Like the more guys we have like that in the locker room, the better, in my opinion. And then also just seems like a real pro and pretty charming. And like I don't know, I like this personality coming into the team.
Yeah, he seems like a good addition, and even to the point of this thing about his number, right? And he said, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that was cool." Just because he's number 14 and Diego Fagundes is number 14, and he said, "Look, if I'd have known the history, I would have at least like texted Diego and made sure it was okay or whatever." Just that like respect for other players,
Yeah.
in the history of the club, I think was a neat little addition.
What else we got, Jeremiah?
Austin FC announced technical staff, soccer operations staff. This was actually last week, the day the show came out. Hired Yago Aguiar Zone as director of domestic scouting and recruitment, and John Turner is director of player personnel. Aguiar was in Poland before, also worked in Spain, Georgia, I'm assuming that's the country, Hong Kong, and the UAE. So there's another piece of the puzzle on who the scouts are. Do you think this is another one where somebody that's probably been around for a while and doing scouting, and we just finally got like the official news?
I would guess that's likely. I know for a fact that the majority of the scouting department was already like hired and working before we ever got that announcement. I don't, when was that? Like in September or something like that? Like,
It was at the end of September, right, when we had that press conference with Burrell, where he
yeah.
kind of made it seem like most of them, if not all of them, were already doing their jobs.
Yeah. And so Aguilar may have been one of those people. I don't know for sure. And looking at his resume, like, I don't know. I know that Wisla Krakow, where he was working, is a respected club as far as these smaller European leagues go. But aside from that, like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know anything about him, and I don't know that we could ever know anything about him. But it is very much what we've heard from, like, about Burrell wants to bring in UEFA, like UEFA coaches, UEFA scouts, people who are Spanish or have experience in Europe or something like that. That's very much going to be the focus of what he does in Austin.
And then the other news we got was Jason Grubb, who had been with Austin FC2, is now the first team set piece coach. And his background is Grubb's background before that had been a goalkeeping coach. So with the Dynamo Academy, with Dynamo 2, and the U.S. men's national team. So maybe that's a little bit of sort of being able to work with Preston Burpo, because Preston has a lot to do with the special teams part of things. So it seems like coming from the keeping background is probably a good place to do that. I mean, I guess the more attention on set pieces, the better. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Wolff was talking about this and seemed to say we are going to put more focus on this year. And I noticed some differences in this Galaxy game. We didn't see as many of the short corners that we saw last year. The way that it seemed to be more I don't want to say trick plays, but there's very distinct starting formations where you see guys lined up in a column perpendicular to the goal, and then one guy would wrap around. It does seem to be a bit more complex than what we saw a lot of last year, as far as balls being played into the box from the corner. So I've noticed the difference. Time will tell if it actually works. But it did seem like a bit more complex set piece structure in this game.
But probably not quite Ted Lasso style college football level complexity, or whatever that play was.
The annexation of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
I think that's, I guess this is from the Little Giants.
The Little Giants, yes, exactly. And I guess one other thing, this is just a tweet that came out today. Austin, was it 61% of attacking throw-ins? They said 61% of attacking throw-ins into the box last year. That's the Nick Lima effect. The next highest in the league, I think, was Vancouver with 54, and then nobody else was over 50. So Austin is very much an outlier on attacking throw-ins. Do you think that's a part of the game plan, or do you think that was like a Nick Lima special that we will no longer see more of?
No, I mean, I could see it change. I wish I would have been paying attention to this during the Galaxy game. I don't remember if we saw any long throws in that game or not, but John Gallagher took his fair share of long throws last year too. And I don't know if he throws it as far as Lima, but he could still throw it pretty far. So I don't think it's gone just because Lima's gone. I would guess Colemanage can't throw it as far as Gallagher, but Biro is a pretty good frame. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a decent long throw on him, but yeah, time will tell to see if how that fits into the new set piece strategy, because I think that is a set piece. If you're throwing a ball into the box, I think you could call that a set piece. And so we'll see how it fits into that strategy and what they want to do with it. But I don't think just because Lima's gone, it's necessarily going to go away.
All right, let's take one more break, and then we'll hit the rest of the news, and then we can close the show out.
Sounds good.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by premier sponsor McGuire Woods Consulting, who helps clients in the public affairs space, from lobbying at the local, state, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities, but only advertises on Moon Tower Soccer because it's the home of the two-time reigning Copa Tejas champions, which is the most important trophy in professional sports. I don't know if y'all watched the Super Bowl or not. I'll say it. I'm not afraid of them coming after me. I'm not going to call it the big game.
I love it.
The big game is the last game of the Copa Tejas. That's what I call the big game. So contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at www.mwcllc.com for more information.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson Realty team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused, have over 30 years of combined real estate experience, and sent me a Valentine's Day that arrived in my mailbox today. Valentine's card that arrived in my mailbox today. So thanks to the Sage Wilson team for that.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com. All right, Jeremiah, we are back. There are a few other pieces of news we need to get to. What should we start with?
Well, let's start with the fact that the regular season is coming soon. We've talked about Austin starting play on the 24th. Inter Miami versus RSL. Of course, Lionel Messi will kick the season off on the 21st with a 4-hour preview show, sideline reporters in both English and Spanish. and whoever else knows what. But we still do not have a 2024 playoff format either way. I wish I could remember how late it took last year, but this is
I
something.
want to say it was at least a few games into the season before they
Okay.
announced it.
Yeah, I remembered. It's like I don't even think they had the playoffs announced when the season started, which I guess it's a long season, and that's fine. But that continues to be very MLS-y of them. Speaking of that, also we have this open debate about what the participation will be from MLS clubs in the U.S. Open Cup. There's a Jeff Ruder article, I think. Is that who wrote it? On The Athletic today or this week, saying that there is regular contact almost daily between the league and U.S. Soccer, but that no decisions have been made. So several options that are being discussed. Maybe not letting the teams that have qualified for CCC play, the options of like letting a combination of the first and second team play, maybe expanding rosters to 30 to let some of the second team players play in this competition early on. And then you had this, where did you pick this up? You had like a tidbit about this that I thought was interesting.
Well, yeah, I don't remember who I was talking to about this, but reading through, I think last year as we were approaching Champions League, which is now known as CCC, and Open Cup, like the rules for those competitions, I don't think there's anything within the rules that would stop MLS from bringing up some second team players to play in it. I could be wrong, but from what I understand, it's their own, like MLS's own rules that are keeping them from doing this. So they have this short-term loan rule, which we saw, I think Val Noel, Joe Hafferty, guys like this.
David Rodriguez, I think, was on one.
David Rodriguez, I don't think he ever played, but they did call him up on this short-term loan. There are very strict limits to how many times you can do that, how many times you can actually play these guys in a game. I think, again, I could be wrong, but I think if MLS would just change their own rule about these short-term loans and allow more of those, that they could play more of their second team players in the Open Cup matches. And so, like, I don't know if there's other reasons why they wouldn't want to do that, but if their goal is to not burden their first team players as much, like that seems like a pretty obvious way to do it.
And that is the stated goal. So that would seem like a really easy way to get there, unless there's some other factor behind it. I mean, there's always the theory that it's the competition that they make the least money off of. So like MLS is not super motivated to be overly cooperative, but there seems to be a lot of options out there. Also, if you're a season ticket holder, remember the season ticket, the MLS season pass code that you had for last year will not work anymore, and you should have a new one. My email came on February 1st. I don't know if you checked when year it was, but I'm guessing that's when everybody got there. So be sure to do that. Log in, see wall-to-wall Messi coverage along with some other Austin FC stuff. But get in early. Don't wait till right before the first game and then stress out about being able to, or the first away match. Don't stress out about doing that before you get to watch it.
We also got the Austin FC 2 schedule and all of the MLS Next Pro schedule. I was looking through, at least in like the first half of the season, I was really kind of hoping, like my parents come to a lot of the first team games and they have never been to an Austin FC 2 game. And we're really hoping there would be a weekend where like maybe Evisito plays on a Friday and the first team plays on a Saturday and they can make a weekend of it. I don't know that that happens ever, or maybe not very often, which was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, that's kind of disappointing because that's a fun way. It's one, I mean, the games are super fun games anyhow to go to, but the more you sort of make a double dip weekend out of it, the better it is. But I would encourage folks to go ahead and continue out there, see the new scoreboard that will hopefully be a little more communicative at St. David's Performance Center than last year's was. Hang out with your friends, and I guess expect probably not as great results if what we believe from Rodolfo Biro's philosophy about using the second team is true, but still fun results. And still the chance to, it's like, I always grew up watching minor league baseball, right? And it's a chance to, it really seems like this is your chance to see the stars of tomorrow play today if Austin FC2 really is committed to youth in the way that it seems like they are.
Yeah, and we still don't have any word on Austin FC's roster. I think, so the first game is going to be March 15th. So I would guess we would be getting some type of release about a roster at some point in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I'll be interested to see who is on this roster and how many of them are starting to be these younger local guys.
And then one other bit of news we got that we've professed is not our area of expertise is that the EMLS Cup, again, will be coming back to Austin. Again, at South by Southwest. During South by Southwest, and again at ACL Live. So the knockout rounds will be in front of a live audience at ACL Live on March 10th. I don't really get this, but Austin signed a new player who I don't believe lives in this hemisphere. Diogo Mendez, who represents Austin FC in 2024, and also represented Liverpool FC in the 2022-2023 E-Premier League season. All that to say, I guess, 2 years ago we got to go to this thing as media, and it was actually really fun. As much as I don't necessarily get the mechanics behind it, and it seems a little bit off to watch guys play video games on the stage.
The atmosphere was good, though.
Yeah, the atmosphere was good. It was a really good time. The band was there. I think they had a couple players signing autographs. I really enjoyed it. It's a surprisingly good experience. So if you get the chance to go, if you got some time, I would definitely encourage you to check that out.
All right. I think that is everything, Jeremiah. Again, remember next week, Andy Lockney is going to join Mike and Jeremiah to talk about the New Jersey's development process. And then we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on Twitter at elviahero87 and at jbentley_ATX, and then at Moontower Soccer on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Sign up for the Patreon. Sign up for Phil West's Substack, which is verdeallday.substack.com. Thanks so much for listening. I will be off next week. Mike will be joining, and they're going to have an interview. We'll have whatever news is going on, and we're also going to play at least most of the live recording that's happening this week at Amplify Credit Union. We'll be back next week. Until then, my name is Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing, see you never.
La gente
Oh my God.